I see in Zoom. For your information, we are streaming these webinars in LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. So for the participants in Zoom, you will have the possibility to directly interact with us during the webinars. After the presentation of IBAN, there will be a session for question and answering. So please don't be afraid, just you can switch on your camera after the presentation and then feel free to make your question. You can also reserve, let's say, yourself. There is a button in the list of participants where there is this hand, and then you can reserve there your question. For the participant connected from YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn, you can write your question in the comments, and then we have some colleagues that they will direct the question to me, so you have also the possibility to interact with us during these webinars. So as you know, this webinars is organized in the framework of the SocialRES project. SocialRES is a project co-financed by the European Commission. It's an Horizon 2020 project. Let's say the aim of SocialRES is to investigate the business models for social innovation, such as crowdfunding, renewable energy cooperative, and aggregation. These social innovation are therefore relevant for the achievement of energy democracy. We are happy that this webinars is organized during the European Green Week, that is hosting several webinars related to zero pollution. And then I think I will give, after a short introduction, the floor to Iban. Iban Lizarralde is our speaker today. Iban is an assistant professor at the ESTIA Institute of Technologies. He holds a PhD from Toulouse University in industrial design. And then he has worked as a researcher and eco-designer, circular economy in different Horizon 2020 projects. Iban has also a very practical experience on cooperative because he was involved in the foundation of Two Energy Cooperative. And so during these webinars of today, he will really able to provide you experience in learning by doing. What does it mean to establish an energy cooperative? And then he has therefore a great experience on business model for energy democracy and all the social innovation related to the achievement of energy democracy. So I invite all the participants in Zoom to keep muted themselves, the camera off, and then you can switch on the camera after the presentation of Iban. So Iban, I'm very happy now to give the floor to you.
Thank you, Silvia. Thank you everybody who is already connected and following us for this webinar. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes, I can see very well. Yes, perfect. It's in the presentation mode.
Okay, perfect. So let's start with the first webinar about the business models and energy democracy. So maybe some of you have been shocked about this title. We have the same title. We have the keyword business and the keyword democracy. So it's, of course, today I'm not going to talk about democracy. Of course, democracy is not about business, as you can imagine. But today I would like to focus on energy democracy. And energy democracy, it's let's keep it simple to a start. For us, in the SocialRES project, energy democracy is mainly to go for a centralized energy system to a decentralized system. And so developing distributed renewable energy means, and to do this with more social participation. So when we talk about energy democracy today, it's not only about the technical aspects, but it's mainly about social aspects. So it's mainly developing renewable energy with more social participation. This is what we mean by energy democracy. I know it's a quite simple definition. We can go further. We can discuss about the engagement of citizens. We can discuss about the ownership of citizens. And so later, if you have questions, we can get more into the details and the definition of what is the energy democracy. So when we talk about energy democracy, if we ask ourselves, okay, what citizen wants now? If democracy is about what citizen wants, it's usually you hear about citizens. We like to develop renewable energies. We like to have 100% energy system based on renewable energies, on distributed renewable energies. I have seen a recent survey in France some weeks ago. A few weeks ago, it's a very recent survey that said that 84% of the citizens, the young citizens, are ready to pay more for green electricity. So it's not only a fact of dreaming or saying we would like to develop renewable energy. No, it's that people would like to develop this renewable energy, but are ready to pay more for this green electricity. And this is what people want. So what's going on? Why is not this the reality? If I mean democratical country in the democratical state, if people wants this, why it's not the reality? Of course, the first answer to this question, many people say, well, this is about big company, large companies that control the energy sector, and they don't really want this energy democracy. They don't really want distributed energy systems, and well, they're thinking about how to develop these renewable energy systems. So this is the first answer, and of course it's true that there are some big companies that have a power in this energy sector, and it's true also that since the last crisis of 2008, they have been very well organized in lobbying, and they have thousands of euros in order to organize this lobby in Brussels. So this is one of the first answer. Now the second answer is more philosophical. Let's say like this. It's many years ago. It was Ivan Illich that discussed about the technological slavery, and he said that we have to be careful, very careful, how we develop the technology, because we can become slaves of this technology. I know this quote is very, very philosophical, but I propose you to see recent examples. I have a very good example that I saw last week. François Bayrou, who is the High Commissioner here in France, the next minister, and he was discussing, he had just published a report about renewable energy, and he says that the development of distributed solar and wind energy is source of problems in the grid. And then he gets into the details about this, how to develop renewable energy, and saying that renewable energy is produced on low voltage and direct current, but our grid, the French grid, it works with high voltage and alternative current. So our grid is not ready for renewable energy, and that was his main conclusion. Our grid is not ready. So we can ask ourselves, is this about the democracy? Is this about the political question? Is it about political decision? Or there are already some technical aspects that have been decided, and there are some barriers, or the political choice is limited. So behind these philosophical aspects, we have very accurate questions, real questions. And as you can say, we have a good example now. And personally, I heard each week, I see people, I hear experts, politics saying, okay, yes, renewable energy, yes, it's beautiful, but there's always a but, saying that from a technical point of view, we are not ready, or the grid is not ready, or whatever. And so we can ask ourselves what's going on with this energy democracy. If from a technical point of view, there have been already some decisions that limit these democratical decisions. No? So we can, in English, there is a term which is called path dependent. Now, the path dependent, and from a technical point of view, we have to be very, very careful. Each time we take a decision from a technological point of view, we can define a path, and we can limit this democracy and the political decisions. But when we see that, even if this is the reality, we see that people that are doing things. Citizens are organizing themselves and they are launching accurate projects, real projects. And this is a reality in Europe. And these citizens have not waited to have a clear framework to develop this project. Today in Europe, there are thousands of projects of distributed renewable energy, financed, funded, owned by citizens. And as we will see later, these kind of projects have been launched in a very specific frame and following some specific business models. And this is the goal. This is the goal of the SocialRES project. In the SocialRES project, we are working on these aspects. How can together, how can we make energy? And I invite you, before the end of this presentation, I say already that I invite you to go to our web page where you can find already some resources, some documents that we have developed in the frame of this project. And of course, if you want to go more into the details of different aspects I want to present today, you can find in our web page. So which are the main objectives of SocialRES? So the main aim of SocialRES is to work on non-technological aspects. We said that technical aspects are important, but there are many socio-economic aspects that go beyond only technological aspects. So we are going to focus on social innovations that we understand that this is a good tool, this is a facilitator for energy democracy. And behind these social innovations, of course, we have specific business models, we have specific service models. And always we focus only on the energy sector, as you have understood. So what are we going to do and what are we doing currently in SocialRES? I'm not going to go into the details, but as you can see, we have already defined and analyzed the driving factors of social innovations in the energy sector. And we have already analyzed also some specific business models in the social innovation. Then we realized that there is a very important aspect. It's about the behavioral. Behavioral aspects are extremely important because we see that citizens, they behave differently when they have to fund this renewable energy, but mainly we see that they behave differently from a consumption point of view. And as you know, one of the main characteristics of electricity is that it's extremely difficult to storage electricity. So it's very, very important to have a good balance between consumption and production. So as soon as you have engaged citizens, you realize that these citizens can have an important role concerning not only the generation, but also the consumptions. And then we can find a good balance and we can have important symbiosis between generation and consumption. And of course, you can see in this, if you go to the webpage, you can check also the different analysis that we are doing now with use cases, and we will finish also with some policy recommendations. So, for the energy communities, when we're talking about energy democracy, we see we were talking about liberalization of energy market. We are talking about new actors that are getting in this market. In social projects, we are going to focus on 3 actors, which are the energy cooperatives, the crowdfunding platforms, and the aggregators. We believe that these 3 cases are very close to the social participation, and of course, we would like to focus on the business models that they are developing within these 3 cases. The goal is not only to understand and to analyze our 3 cases, the cooperatives, which are very linked to the citizen involvement and the sense of belonging, the crowdfunding platforms, which is very related to the citizen financing, and which is a good way also to start this involvement, this social participation. Usually the first step for many citizens is through a crowdfunding platform. And we have, of course, the aggregators. And in the frame of SocialRES, we will talking about a specific case, which is the peer-to-peer platform in order to trade energy. As you can see, the goal is not to analyze the three cases separately, but to see which kind of synergies we can find between these cases and how can we develop a model or several business models that hybridate the cooperative aspects with the platforms, either either crowdfunding platforms or peer-to-peer platforms. So I'm not going to get into the details of the members of the consortium. You can see that we are working with different countries, and within the consortium of SocialRES, we have several cooperatives, crowdfunding platforms, but also aggregators. So let's start with the first one. I propose you to start with the crowdfunding. Crowdfunding platforms. Crowdfunding is a method of pooling small amounts of capital, basically. In the energy sector, of course, this small amount of capitals are used to invest on usually renewable energy projects. So there are different types of crowdfunding platforms. We would like to focus here in two specific crowdfunding platforms, which are crowd investing or crowd lending. And we have a study. Basically, there are crowdfunding platforms which are related to lending, to crowd lending. And we have found that this is a very good beginning for many citizens that we would like to start in participation to develop new renewable energy means. We have some examples, of course, related to this crowdfunding platform, but what we realized is that these citizens go further. They can start lending money, but then they can go further in their engagement. They can invest in specific companies. And we have a very interesting case in the frame of SocialRES, which is abundance investment. We have launched a specific model related to climate change bonds. Climate change bonds, it's a model about crowd lending, but directly working with the municipalities. And directly working with municipalities, so basically the municipalities are those who are developing new projects, and they would like to develop interesting projects, but sometimes they don't have enough money to invest on these projects. So thanks to abundance investment and thanks to these climate change bonds, they have access to cheaper money in order to invest. But what is the most important thing is that this money comes from the citizens. So this is, as I tell you, this is a very first step that citizens can start participating. But once you do this step, we see that the second step is usually they invest directly. So they take shares in abundance company. And of course, you start creating communities. People start knowing each other. They go to the meetings of the council, of the municipality. They know each other and they start developing new projects. They can change the behavioral aspects. So again, this is a very starting point, but then the next steps could be in the good direction for energy democracy. The second case that we have been analyzing are aggregators. Aggregators are, when we define aggregators, the first thing that we have to do is to define the scope of these aggregators. Of course, the scope we can define from a geographical point of view or from an energy value chain point of view. From a geographical point of view, most of you have heard about these big aggregators, usually working in the national level, and these big aggregators used to aggregate energy generation or either the consumption aspects. But there are really big companies, and we have recent examples that these big companies have been bought by transnational companies, by oil companies. So this is one type of aggregator. Of course, we can we can find smaller aggregators working in another scope, working in a regional level. And from an energy value point of view, the value chain point of view, we have to differentiate and we have to ask ourselves what we are aggregating. So that's the first question. Are we aggregating a generation, which is very interesting. If we're talking about distributed renewable energy, in one moment it could be interesting to aggregate these distributed sources in order to launch a specific services, for example, for the, let's see, the grid management. And that's another question that we should ask ourselves when we're talking about aggregators. What for? Why we're doing this aggregation? Are we doing because we want to secure our energy value chain? And this is the case, for example, when we're dealing with DSOs, or we're dealing with the distribution system. So we are, thanks to this aggregation, we are securing our energy supply. Or we are doing this because we want to go for a sustainable energy system. Or we are doing this to reduce cost, or to make price more affordable for people who don't have access for the energy. So again, there are many different types of aggregators, and we have to be careful when defining these aggregators. In the case of SocialRES, we have focused on a very specific case, which is the peer-to-peer energy trading. And here it's a very interesting issue, because the more and more you have here the word prosumer. We're talking about the citizens that produce their own electricity, but they consume also, of course. So they are prosumers. And if we create a model where we have a lot of dulings prosuming electricity, then of course we can think about a system where we have this peer-to-peer trading between citizens. Of course, someone can ask me, well, democracy and energy democracy is more than that. Yes, we can ask ourselves, when we're talking about energy democracy, how we understand democracy. Democracy is just an aggregation of individuals, of dulings, or it's more than that. There is a collective aspect in the democracy. So, of course, we should not limit the energy democracy to the fact that tomorrow we will have a society where we have millions of individuals, millions of prosumers, and we will limit to energy trading between these individuals. So democracy, it's not only aggregating individuals, it's more than that. So we can go further than these peer-to-peer enabling platforms. And we can ask ourselves also, who is dealing with these platforms? Who is going to manage these platforms? Who is going to own these platforms? Those are questions that we should ask for energy democracy. The last type of companies that I would like to share with you are energy cooperatives. Energy cooperatives, as I told you at the very beginning, it's they have not wait to have a clear legal framework to launch this kind of cooperatives. In Europe, we have thousands of cooperatives. In the RESCOP network, we have almost 2,000 cooperatives, and there are more than 1 million citizens involved in these cooperatives. So this is the reality right now in Europe, and I'm only giving you an example of the RESCOP network. What I would like to share with you here is the relationship that that we can do between two type of energy communities. Which is interesting that in the recent clear energy package, from a European level, we have now a framework for two types of energy communities. On one hand, the citizen energy community, on the second hand, the renewable energy community. And I find that this framework very interesting for the next project developments, to launch new business models. And I think that this kind of this framework based on energy communities can define a more clear path to energy democracy. But what we can find in this energy communities definition? On one hand, we see how these communities are created. These communities are based on voluntary and open participation and is effectively controlled by the members or shareholders that are natural persons, local authorities, or small enterprises. There is often also a variable which is linked to the locality. It should be local. So it should be local. We can see that there can be persons, small companies, councils, and municipalities. So we can find that within this community, we can mix this type of questions. So it's not only about simplifying between private projects or public projects. It's more than that. It's more complex than that, but we change the way we classify it, and it's more about, okay, what can we do locally? What can we do locally, and which kind of people, citizens, municipalities can we gather in order to launch these projects? And of course, the second point, the primary purpose of these communities is not only to generate financial profit. These communities are mainly created for environmental, social purposes. There could be also economical purposes if we consider that dealing with energy poverty is only about economic aspects. But we see that the most important point here is that these communities are not created only to generate a financial profit. And this is the interesting issue here. How can we create these communities? And if I propose you these two frameworks in this chapter is because I think they are very close to energy cooperatives. This is not something new for energy cooperatives. As you have seen in Europe, there are already hundreds of cooperatives, and these cooperatives, since the very beginning, were created with these values. These cooperatives have in their internal policies the goal to develop renewable energy with social participation and with a local scope, within a local scope. So if I finish this presentation, what's the point with the business model? So if we check what's the business model and which are the elements that we have to be careful developing a business model for energy democracy. So first of all, it's I will take the value proposition. Usually we start with the business model defining the value proposition. Okay, I'm not going to be very original here. Europe is always saying, okay, if we're going to develop our future energy system, you have to be careful that this system has to be secure, affordable, and sustainable. Okay, then each one can create a different hierarchy here, but as we can see, this value proposition has to take into account sustainability aspects, has to take into account that this energy is open to everybody. Every citizen, every European citizen has to have access to that energy. And of course, from a technical point of view, we have to be very careful that what we develop is secure, is robust. And this is very linked also what we call the resilience. How can we develop a system that is resilient? So the value proposition is not only about developing sustainable or renewable energy. It's more than that. And here, what is interesting is that if we take the current stakeholders in the energy systems, well, this is not only about companies. We see that citizens are having a more and more important role in this system. In the future energy system, we have to develop this system, take into account the role of the citizens. So again, as I proposed you some minutes ago, I personally think that this is not only creating communities with the aggregation of citizens, with aggregation of individuals or dulians. It's more than that. Creating energy communities is more than that. And once we create these energy communities, there are very interesting questions that they start. For example, which kind of activities should we do? It's about only funding these projects, or it's also about developing, installing, or it's more than that. We can go further and think about the consumption. Okay, can we change our consumption partners? Yes, if we can change our consumption partners, how can we change? And what's the relationship between the energy generation? But these energy communities is also about governance. So when we develop this kind of business models, we have to think about what kind of governance we establish in these communities. And here, this is directly linked to the democracy and how we understand democracy. It's not only about funding projects. It's not only about participating one day and tomorrow I have already forgotten. It's about creating these communities. It's about ownership also. I fund, but I have the ownership, part of the ownership. And from a democratic point of view, I can participate. I can be part of the decisions. So all these aspects can get into the governance. And how decisions are taken, how the voting system is organized. Is it related to the money you've brought at the beginning? Or we consider that one person, one vote? Well, all these aspects has to be defined. And all these details make that the governance can be completely different in one case or another. And these are the real questions that we have to ask ourselves when defining a community. Because right now we can see all over Europe, there are many, many energy communities emerging, but we have to be careful how we use this word energy communities and which are the different definitions of what we call energy communities. So as soon as you are in front of the energy community, ask yourself, which is the participation of the citizens, which are the activities involved in this community, and which is the governance of this, which is the revenue model, but which is also the ownership model. And a last question, but it's also important, what is the decentralization level? Can we create a community in a European level, in a state level, or maybe we should focus more on a territorial level, regional level, local level, where people can really realize what's going on with the energy, where they can really understand what's going on with energy democracy, and their participation it will be more efficient in this case. Thank you for your attention. So this was my presentation. Of course, we have now more time, and I will be glad to answer your questions. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot, Ivan. It was a great presentation. So let's see, first of all, if we have a question from the audience. So we can go in the Zoom mode again. So let me check. Let's see in the chat. Not for the moment. I just invite the participant in Zoom, please don't be afraid to ask directly questions, so you can switch on your camera and then address your question directly to Ivan. I wait a second, otherwise we have a lot of questions from my side. Okay, I don't see any reaction for the moment from the participant, but please.
Yes, Sonia speaking. I would have a question. Thank you so much for your presentation, Ivan. So do you think that self-consumption is a good way towards energy democracy?
Well, self-consumption, it's first of all, it's a very technical issue to start. When we consider this, when we're doing self-consumption, yes, we are installing some generation facilities at home or in the building, and we are trying to consume directly what we are. So if we limit the definition of self-consumption to that, it's not really about energy democracy, but it can be a good path. Can be a good path because first we are decentralizing the system. We are trying to decentralize. So we're not talking only about renewable energies. We're talking about decentralized, distributed renewable energies, which is, of course, a first step for real energy democracy. And then the question is again the same. Once you start doing self-consumption, how you organize yourself? Is it about only individual self-consumption? Am I trying to optimize my personal home in order to achieve a maximum ratio of self-consumption, or I'm thinking about the society, I'm thinking about other people in my city, in my neighborhood. So I'm trying to develop a system that I can share with them the energy, the electricity that is produced. So again, that's another logic. It's another logic. We can the more and more in France, for example, we have now a quite clear framework for collective self-consumption, which is a good idea. Still a lot of barriers, basically related to tax aspects, so still a lot of barriers. But we are going on this. So, and the logic is completely different. I'm not thinking about installing a few solar panels at home, but I first create a group with my neighborhood, with other people in the city. And once I have created a group, I try to think, okay, which kind of generation system we can install, where, and the most important thing, how we share this electricity that is produced. And this is important because in a, let's say in a capitalistic market, this is about the offer and the price, the demand, the offer, and usually this energy sharing is done with a capitalistic economic logic, no? But this sharing can be done in many ways. If I organize a collective self-consumption group, we can decide that the first kilowatt hour that is produced is for the family that has low incomes. This kind of decisions we can take within the group. And this is about democracy. Within this kind of groups, we create our own rules. And this, of course, if you gather, if you aggregate this kind of collective self-consumption, you can have the same logic in an aggregation of different collective self-consumption systems. We're talking more and more about energy sharing systems. So it's not only about with my neighborhood. So here the business model of peer-to-peer platforms could be interesting also. So we can imagine tomorrow that I can generate at home my own electricity, but I can maybe sell to my son, to my daughter who is studying in a city and who has a small apartment in the city. So I can share them. Why not? But again, it's not only about these individuals that are sharing. I think that we have to ask ourselves who is managing these platforms and how we manage these platforms.
Thanks a lot, Ivan. We have a question from Georgius. If we can share with him the link of the survey on citizens willing to invest in renewables in France. I think, I don't know if you were referring, Ivan, to the SocialRES report during your presentation, or if it was another report mentioned by Georgs.
Sorry, can you repeat about what?
Yes, if we can share the link to the survey on citizens willing to invest in renewable in France.
Yes, we have a detail in the. We can share with you the different documents that have been implemented have been developed in the SocialRES. We have a small chapter about this. If you want to go more into the details, I can share with you the documents. Unfortunately, they are in French, but I can see if I can find in English. I propose you to contact me directly. Just tell me if it's okay for you, if it's in French or or if I have to find other documents that maybe synthesize these documents in English.
Thanks, Iban. Yes, so Georgios, please just contact Iban. You have the email address here just in the PowerPoint presentation. Perfect. I have a question for you, Iban. So it's very important what you say related also to energy poverty, because if we have energy democracy in terms of governance or energy community, we can really also help the people that maybe have more difficulties internal in the community. It's very relevant, in my opinion, what we have now in the two European directives about the citizen energy community and renewable energy community. My question is based on the definition that you have seen into this directive. Are still already existing a community that are in line with this definition? You say that the cooperative, they are following basically the definition of the European Commission, or the new energy community is in order to be in line with the new directive, they really have to make an effort, let's say, to be in line with the new national legislation, because there will be a transposition, of course, at national level of all the European directive.
Yes, that's of course, this directive now is transposing in different states. So we have the first laws come in, and we can see how it's transposed into each country. There are still some difficulties. Of course, there are still some difficulties because it's. Let's take the example of collective self-consumption. As I told you, in France now we have this freedom to organize this energy sharing with quite freely. I mean, we can decide how to share, which was not the case 2 years ago. And so it's when the first sharing rules are defined by the government, and it's not possible for you to decide who is going to profit the first electricity generated. You cannot, even if you want, you cannot work with this energy poor aspects, and you cannot really work directly. Of course, you can organize other aspects, other actions, but now in the case of France, and I think it's the only one who has this very accurate framework for this legal framework, but in other countries we see that they are developing this legal framework, and we will see how it will be possible to work on these aspects. Once that technically is possible, then again, it's only a matter of democracy about how you define the rules within the community. If within the community you define the rules, taking into the consideration not only what you are offering, but which are your needs, well, this is a basic aspect of democracy. It's not focused only on what you are giving, but focus also on what each person needs. No? And I think this is an issue that can be applied not only for energy, for other many things. I'm happy to discuss, for example, here with agriculture that are going organic, and it's more or less the same problem. We are dealing with this poor aspects, poverty aspects. We are usually, there are some big companies saying, okay, I'm able to give you this commodity in a very good price, so I'm working to eradicate the poverty. But this is not only a fact of offering. When we deal only with the offering aspects, it seems that the goal is to have the cheapest energy possible. And this is not only, the goal is not to have the cheapest energy, but we have to ask ourselves at the same time the question of offering, but also the demand aspect. If there are people that are inside, but there are poor people, it's because they cannot offer energy or organic food or whatever. So let's ask ourselves why they cannot offer that. If we are giving more possibilities, if we are empowering these people, and if we are organizing a society that these people are not in poverty, they will have this possibility, this capability to pay a true price of the energy.
Yes, yes, we are completely right. Thanks, Ivana. I see that Georgios, you have a question. You raise your hand. So Georgios, if you want to talk, please, you can also switch on the camera if you want. I just ask directly your question to Ivan.
Yes, thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, Ivan, for the nice presentation and very fruitful discussion and very interesting subject. I was wondering, because you well mentioned about the peer-to-peer transactions and so on with blockchain technologies, and if we consider that the whole technical behind this democracy aspects, like we need smart grids and the EVs that are coming very fast. What do you think is the artificial intelligence and machine learning technology is going to assist on this direction to more democratic way of distribute and transaction of energy, or is going to be a barrier? What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, Giorgio. You have well, you have used several words that maybe we need 1 hour for each word. It's well, first of all, these peer-to-peer platforms are not only based on blockchain technology. It could be we can use other kind of technologies also. It's not only about blockchain, but it's true that the blockchain technology, it allows us to have a more decentralized way also to keep its data. So we get out from the logic of having centralized data organization, let's say like this, in a simplified way. Then what about the machine learning and other artificial intelligence means? Well, I'm not an expert on this. I have the chance to work with my colleagues who they are experts on this, and of course we are using this technology in several ways. First of all, as I told you, this is about data to get in more efficiency. Can they have a role in democracy? They might have a role in energy democracy, but this is not, you don't create energy democracy based on technology. As Illich said, going back to the quote of Illich, you have to find a very good balance between which kind of technology you are using for a technology to have energy democracy. Tomorrow, what we are doing right now, for example, we're talking about renewable energy. We're talking about distributed renewable energy. So one of the aspects that, for example, artificial intelligence is very useful is for all the prediction aspects. One of the characteristics of solar, of wind, is that it's very hard to predict when we will have sun, we will have wind. So, of course, this kind of technology is extremely useful to do these predictions. If we are able to do these predictions, that means that we can think how we are going to deal this consumption. We can think also how can we aggregate the different generation sources, so we can manage all these aspects. So this is one of the applications that we find that it's very that it could be interesting. Then you have talked also about the blockchain, dealing mainly. We are using in another project the blockchain technology in order to deal with smart contracts between customers. So this could be another application. Of course, we have many generation means, and in the same system, in the same community, we have many consumers. And in the French framework, we are dealing with these exchanges each 30 minutes. So each 30 minutes, we are dealing who is generating what and who is consuming what. Each 30 minutes, you have to say who is producing what, who is consuming what, and then you have to generate these contracts between the different participants. Of course, as you can imagine, the data that you are using, it's so big that you need this kind of technology in order to deal with all this data.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. So it was not easy to answer to this question, I assume. With
no, then of course I cannot get it. If you asking me how it works, the blockchain, I would say you joker.
Yes. No, well, we can talk even for hours. Thanks a lot, Georgios. I have a question. If there are not other questions from the Zoom participant, no. So, Ivan, let's suppose that I'm a citizen, that I got particularly inspired by your presentation of today. What should I do tomorrow if I really want to make my contribution for energy democracy? One possibility is to buy a photovoltaic system, let's say. The other one is to find an energy community or a cooperative in my town where I live. Can you just briefly summarize what are the steps to be done and what is the involvement, what is related to the involvement as citizens that will become a member of a cooperative or a community?
I wouldn't say, Sylvia, that there is a clear path with step 1, step 2, step 3. It's I think it's more complex than that. What we realize is that there are some. Let's take, for example, 3 or 4 types of citizens that are really involved in the energy democracy, and let's go background and see which were the steps that they made, and we will realize that the path they made to become really members of this of energy community or really involved in this energy democracy aspect, we will realize that there are different paths. Maybe some can start from a technical point of view, interesting what's going on at home, what's the consumption, I would like to reduce my consumption, I would like to improve the efficiency, and then, as you said, maybe I can buy 1 panel or 3 panels and start self-consuming. So this is very, let's say, geek oriented, but many people have started like this. You realize what's going on with energy. You realize what's going on and you make the efforts and you see which are the limits. And as soon as you identify those limits, you go on, and the second step could be maybe, okay, I'm getting in touch with the group that is working on these aspects. And once I meet the group, I realize that, okay, it's not only about technical aspects, but it's also about governance, it's about funding. So the second step is different, and the third step, I get involved differently. Okay, that's one way. It's getting from a technical point of view. Another way that we have seen very often, what happens that the people say, okay, I would like to do an effort. I have some money, not a lot of money, but I would like to participate funding a renewable energy project. So and here the crowdfunding platforms can have an important role. So what we have seen, that reality is that many people start putting money in a crowdfunding platform, and then they go on participating in a different way. The third case, of course, you have mentioned the energy cooperatives. Now we see that in Europe, in many places, there are already energy cooperatives. So of course, it's a very good beginning. You go to a meeting, you start participating in energy democracy, and usually you realize that in an energy cooperative, there are many working groups. In our case, for example, there are more, again, geek-oriented groups, or there are other groups working on gender aspects, working on energy poverty, let's say more socioeconomical aspects. But this, I think that everybody can find a role in an energy cooperative. So it's, of course, it's a very good way to begin and to do the first step.
Thanks a lot, Ivan. So we see that the citizens now, they have a lot of possibilities, so they really want to take action. Even though we have seen in one of your deliverables that you have written for SocialRES that the passivity of the society still is a big barrier in order to convince, to inspire the citizens to take action for energy democracy. So also with these dissemination activities, webinars that we are, as I said, in YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter, I really hope that some citizens will be inspired by these webinars in order to give the contribution for a sustainable development. Let's see, I don't see any other question from the participant. So I really think that we can go to the conclusion of these webinars. So I really would like to thank you, Iban, for the great presentation. I really would like to thank the colleague from ICONS that they have provided the technical support to be broadcasting for so different channels. I would like to thank also the colleague from WIP. WIP is the coordinator of the SocialRES project, so Sonia Wilhelm and David van der Zande that are also connected. I forgot to introduce myself before. I'm Silvia Caneva. So I'm the coordinator of the SocialRES project. Iban, as you understood, is a partner of SocialRES. We will organize 12 webinars. This was the first one. The last one will be more or less in March, April 2022, in order to address every 2 weeks, more or less, all the different topics that we have in SocialRES. I go with you in details of what does it mean achieving energy democracy. We really think that this is a very important issue to let's say, avoid the global warming and then to give our contribution to have a more stable climate, let's say, in the future. Because as you know, energy, the CO2 emission from energy are one of the most contributors to the climate change. That's why we are here today. So if, Ivan, do you have any further observation, anything to add?
Well, I would like just to thank you. Today you have seen Iban on the screen doing a presentation, but you have to realize that if this is possible, that there are other people making that this is possible from a technical point of view, from the connection point of view. So I would like to thank those people that have been working so that this webinar has been possible.
Thanks a lot. Thanks to you, Ivan. Okay, so we can close these webinars at this point. Follow SocialRES. The motto is together we make energy of SocialRES, and we're really trying to achieve this motto with energy democracy is the perfect object for this energy community, crowdfunding, and cooperative aggregation, as you have seen. Follow SocialRES because the next webinars is in 2 weeks, more or less, 27th of May. We are going to talk about the behavioral aspect of energy democracy. So I hope it will be interesting for you. Okay, thanks a lot. Have a nice day and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.